This is not your show. This is my deposition.
Amber Heard is alleging that her ex-husband, actor Johnny Depp, was a drug-addicted abuser.
These accusations destroyed Johnny's career and reputation.
It just hit me over and over and over again.
Got this going? For real?
I've never struck Miss Heard. I've never struck a woman.
Fights? Because you start physical fights?
You struck Mr. Depp multiple times during your relationship, didn't you, Miss Heard?
This is case My Channel versus West.
This deposition video has never been seen by the public until now.
I expected the worst. I knew Kanye was a wild card. Mr. West, why have you donned the mask to start this deposition?
You just entered my movie. You know who I am? You thought you could do this to Kanye West?
Kanye thought the rules of regular people don't apply to him.
You crazy?
No, you can
You don't know who you're talking to.
My goal was to stay on that Bronco as long as I could.
Listen to my name, boy.
In this particular lawsuit, there's a power imbalance. At the time, Kanye West is a top 5 global celebrity, entrepreneur, multi-billionaire. The My Channel founders were salt of the earth, 2 guys you'd want to have a beer with. And they were not his equal. My Channel claimed Kanye had stolen their e-commerce technology and put the company out of business. They lost everything. Kanye assumed they were not going to fight back, and he was in for a rude awakening.
This deposition is taking place via Zoom video conferencing.
Mr. Rowe?
What is Atkinson Baker? That's the court reporter? Okay, hang on.
The court reporter service is on twice.
All right.
Madam Court Reporter, can you swear in our witness?
Mr. West, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly state, under penalty of perjury, that the evidence you shall give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
This is case number 220, entitled My Channel versus West.
My name is Michael Popak. Can you hear me, Mr. West?
Yes.
Okay. I see that you're looking down at probably a device. Are you on your phone?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask as a ground rule that you not be on your phone during the exam. Can we agree to that?
Well, is that legally what it should be?
I'm not going to advise you as to the law. That's why your lawyers are here. But that is my ground rule for the deposition, consistent with California law, that you need to be present, focused on the examination, and not on a device.
Due to my mental geniusness, in order to focus on this bullshit, I need to be on a phone.
Counsel, do you want to speak to your client before we continue?
I think, well, Kanye, in terms of, you can listen to the questions and answer them, right?
Okay, I get off the phone.
Okay, Mr. West, why have you donned a mask to start this deposition?
Because you don't have the right to see my face.
And is it your intention to wear that mask for the entire duration of your examination?
Perhaps.
Okay. So, counsel, we're going to take this up with the magistrate, but I'm not going to delay the examination. We'll do it at the break. Kanye obviously had planned a stunt. He had that mask in his pocket. He was just looking for the appropriate moment during the deposition. I'm in for a ride. My goal was to stay on that Bronco as long as I could. Could you state your name and address for the record, sir?
Kanye Omari West.
And your address, sir?
The world. I just got a divorce.
Yeah. The summer of 2020, the founders of My Channel filed a lawsuit against Kanye West for $10 million. My Channel was a technology company that would take any content that was filtered through it, identify that merchandise, price it, and allow the person to buy it all with a click.
It's called live stream shopping. It's already changing the way millions of people shop online.
Think of it like QVC for Gen Z. Home shopping with real-time chats and clickable links.
At the time, Kanye was very unhappy with his e-commerce platform. and he wanted something else. My channel were told to meet with Kanye at his house. My channel claimed they had a handshake deal with Kanye West in order to integrate that technology into his e-commerce platform, selling Yeezy and other Kanye-created products. The My Channel founders invested 10,000 people hours and at least a $7 million total investment into the partnership with Kanye West. They devoted themselves full-time to Kanye. But after months of trying to get paid for the work that they did, Kanye West was no longer returning their phone calls. We finally got a hold of his lawyers, and Kanye's law firm said that a partnership never existed between the parties because there wasn't a written agreement.
They took him at his word and never signed a formal deal. But I could understand why people get caught up in the world of Kanye. I've interviewed Kanye many times, and he's intense. Kanye has that X factor, can make you literally feel like you're the only person in the room.
But the law recognizes an oral contract in that scenario. He really left them with no other choice but to bring the lawsuit against him.
Let the record reflect that the witness has put a mask on. We see the writing on the wall of what's going to happen here. So I'm going to implore the lawyers to speak to their client about being cooperative with the deposition that he's been noticed for and he's under oath. Let's go back to the ground rules for this deposition. You prevailed with the magistrate to have it by Zoom, but I get the equivalent of an in-person deposition. Mr. West, do you understand, sir, that you're under oath as if you were in a court of law? Do you understand that, sir? Yep.
Yes.
I had done my research about Kanye before preparing to take his deposition, and I had known from other media reports that he would attack the person asking the questions, he'd be dismissive over the case. I expected the worst.
I almost borderline like being sued because it's the only time where I can be myself, because I sit in those depositions and it'd be hilarious.
Okay, I get off the phone.
I wanted him to start answering my questions, but we were also prepared for it to take a lot of different twists and turns, including him acting out or being abusive. And one of the things I needed to establish in the deposition at the very beginning is that there was an actual meeting in Kanye's house in Calabasas with My Channel. And that was the start of an oral partnership that in this case is just as binding and just as enforceable as a written contract. Frankly, it happens all the time. That's why the law recognizes oral agreements.
You don't have the right to see my face.
Let's start again, Mr. West. Your home address is what?
I don't have a home.
So you don't have a physical address that you live in?
I don't want to say. You're going to have pops up there.
Mr. Rowe, do you want to talk to your client about answering my questions?
Well, to the extent this is relevant, I mean, I understand why you're asking it, but I don't think it's relevant to the proceedings. Obviously, you can reach him through me.
Are you instructing your witness not to answer the question? We're on question 3 in this deposition. Are you instructing him not to answer?
I'm not. I think he's answered it.
He has not provided an answer. Mr. West, where
I'm
do
not going to tell you where I stay. I'm not going to tell you where I stay. Are you crazy? You think I'm finna tell y'all where I stay? Y'all trying to stick me up with a bullshit, trying to stick me up for some paper? You think I'm finna tell you where I stay? Are you crazy?
So the reason that you're not...
I asked you a question. Are you crazy?
Mr. West, the way this works...
For the record, you didn't answer the question.
The way... Mr. West, this will go a lot better and without a lot of involvement.
What do you mean? It's going great for me. You just entered my movie.
And what movie is that, Mr. West?
Mine, I just told you.
What is the nature of the movie that I've now entered?
I just told you. Next question.
Is the nature of the movie that you're not going to respond to questions when asked?
Are you not going to respond? Are you crazy? Do you think it makes sense for me to give the address to somebody who's already trying to rob me? Are you crazy?
So at this point, I want to catalog his outbursts so I have a clear record for the judge.
Madam Court Reporter, mark the record here.
I can use the video for sanctions.
For the record, you didn't answer the question.
Are you
crazy?
We would do it all again under court order at his expense.
Next question.
On our terms, live and in person, it would give us tremendous leverage over Kanye West.
Okay, where are you currently giving the deposition from? Where is that room?
I'm gonna tell you. You're never gonna see me again.
Madam Court Reporter, same thing. Mark the transcript. And who is in the room with you, if anyone?
No one's in this actual room with me.
Okay. And what other things do you have in the room besides the phone that you've identified?
Are you stupid? I'm not gonna tell you other things. I don't have the time to be talking about. I got a chair in the room. You are talking to the richest black person in the history of America. You're talking to a black Trump supporter, bro. Out of here. Don't ask me no stupid. Ask me the stuff where y'all trying to get the paper from. Ask me what's in this room. Quit wasting your client's money.
All right, Mr. West, I'm going to give you the logistics and the ground rules for this deposition now that we've...
You're not giving me nothing. I don't care about you.
Counsel,
you're not giving me nothing. You can't give me nothing.
Counsel,
are you crazy?
Okay, Kanye.
I'm going to ask that counsel for Mr. West offline speak to their client about his conduct.
No, you can't ask me for nothing, boy. You can't ask him to do nothing, boy. He worked for me, boy.
Everything that's happening here is perfect fodder for me in front of a jury.
You can't ask me for nothing, boy.
How he acted comported with the way that he acted towards our clients. It was a one-to-one correlation. He was erratic.
Are you crazy?
He ghosted our clients.
You trying to stick me up?
This is what led to the dispute.
Out of here.
His own lawyers abdicated their responsibility as officers of the court to keep him on the straight and narrow.
Are you stupid?
And I knew that would piss the judge off as well.
You can't tell my lawyer what to do. You work for me, boy.
Mr. West.
This is a gift to my clients and to the case.
Because where we're going to end up with this, Mr. Rowe, is where we're going to end up with this.
So Michael, why don't you?
I love it. I want it. I want all the smoke. However you want it, boy.
Michael, why don't you give your...
Stick me up? You trying to stick me up? People coming talking about the name of Christ. You know what I'm saying? They're trying to stick me up. Boy, you crazy?
Mr. Rowe?
I live for this.
Mr. Rowe?
I live for this, boy. I ain't gonna get pulled over and you asking me to show my ID. Ask me to tell you where I'm at, boy. You crazy? Answer my question.
Mr. West, are you incapable?
Answer my question. You thought you could do this to Kanye West? Listen to my name, boy. You know who I am? Listen to my name, boy. Your clients, y'all all crazy.
Mr. West.
Y'all all crazy. It's not going to work, boy. God on my side.
This was a case my channel was forced to bring. They're out $7 million. They've abandoned all of their clients, and that Kanye had basically ghosted them. Kanye's law firm said, you got it wrong. A partnership never existed. Where's your contract? And then Sunday service happened.
Kanye West launches Sunday service. It's his weekly gospel service. It's an hour of singing. The choir's wearing Yeezy gear. And then Kanye started live streaming it.
He launched Sunday service with a major e-commerce component that looked suspiciously like the My Channel technology.
Then Kanye said that Sunday service was doing $1 million a night in Yeezy gear merch sales.
We believe he was using their technology in violation of the terms of that oral agreement. And that was the basis for the lawsuit that we had filed.
Listen to my name, boy. You know who I am?
Mr. Rowe, what would you like to do next?
Michael, you can proceed. Proceed with your admonition.
Proceed with my admonition? Okay, so you're not going to... I just want to make sure we're clear for the record.
I was very shocked. He wants me to discipline Kanye. I felt his own lawyers were scared of him.
Mr. Rowe.
I'm free. I'm free.
They had lost control of their own client.
Mr. West, you're not answering my questions. Ekwan, you're going to be...
You can't tell my lawyer what to do. You work for me, boy.
Mr. West, if you're going to continue to have outbursts and be disruptive...
What you mean outbursts? This is where I talk.
I am sure it will end up...
It's an outburst for you to ask a Mensa-level genius multi-billionaire what the hell is in a room with me. Don't disrespect me. I got things to do for the planet. I got people to heal. I got diets to change. I got no time for this.
I'm also
Y'all sticking me up.
Mr. West, if you're done with your outburst, I can come back to
If you're done with your outburst, everything you say is like an outburst to me because you're trying to stick me up. Are you crazy? Are you crazy?
When a witness like Kanye is acting out this way, there's a balance that I'm trying to strike. I am trying to get under his skin.
Mr. West, this is not your show. This is my deposition.
What you mean? This is my show. This is my movie. Everything my show. Everywhere I go, my show.
But I still want to get the exam. I still need his testimony. And so I'm trying to find if there's that moment, that inflection point where he calms down and starts answering questions.
Do you know who you talking to? I'm free. You're not talking to a slave mentality black man. You're an older white gentleman. You wouldn't know the half how to talk to a free man. I'm free. I'm free. I'm free.
Mr. West, are you incapable or unwilling to give an examination today?
What do you mean? This is you examiner, right?
No, you're not answering my questions. You're not answering my questions.
I'm not going to tell you what's in a room with me. I'm not going to answer no dumbass.
Michael, why don't you start with your next question?
Why don't you start with something that makes sense, boy?
No, I'm not. No, Mr. Rowe, I'm going to do my examination in my way. I've asked the witness what materials he has in the room because I don't have the ability to have had this deposition in person, which we required and requested. I get to know what he has next to him in terms of materials. I get to know what technology he has that may be assisting him during the deposition. Let's go back. Let's see if we can get.
I made a calculated risk at that point that I had to establish dominance and that I was in charge.
So I return to my question, Mr. West. What do you have in the room in terms of materials that are in front of you during my deposition? Besides your hat, you have to answer aloud for the court reporter.
What does that hat say?
You can tell the court reporter what the hat says, sir.
So wait a second. You ain't gonna answer none of my questions. I only answer yours?
No, this is my deposition. You're under oath, sir, under penalty of perjury, not me. Madam Court Reporter, read back the pending question.
What do you have in the room in terms of materials that are in front of you during my deposition besides your hat?
I'm not going to answer that.
You refuse to answer my question, sir?
I refuse to answer the question of what I have in the room because it's a dumbass question.
Okay, Madam Court Reporter, mark the record. And for the lawyers on this phone call, to the extent that your client continues to waste my 7 hours of allotted time, we will require him to come back and give his deposition again.
What's going to happen to me? I'm going to go to jail?
Only answer my question, sir.
No, I'm asking. Equine, can I go to jail off of anything related to this lawsuit?
You're not here to ask questions, sir. You're here to answer.
What you mean I can't ask my lawyer a question? You crazy?
No, you can.
You don't know who you're talking to. I'm not some slave of yours, boy.
If you would
what you mean I can't ask my lawyer a question? That's the dumbest. Are you crazy? You just told me I can't ask my lawyer a question.
Mr. West.
No.
Michael, hang on, Michael. So, Kanye, if all we're doing is answering questions today, we'll be just fine.
All right, Mr. Rowe, that's your counsel for your client based on his outburst. Mark the record.
Hey, wait a second. Don't call what I'm doing an outburst. You hear me?
Well, so far, Mr. West, you've called me boy about a dozen times. You've cursed throughout this deposition, and you've refused to answer questions. So I don't know any other way to frame it.
It is a frame, isn't it? You finally said something that made sense.
He is never going to answer a question from me during this deposition. So now let's just make it all about the video that I'm going to use in front of the jury.
What do you mean I can't ask my lawyer a question? Are you stupid?
He actually took the stand at trial with a suit and tie and act like the calm, cool, and collected Kanye. I get to play this video.
You thought you could do this to Kanye West? Y'all all crazy.
Mr. West.
And that will destroy credibility and authenticity with the jury. A jury can smell a fraud a mile away.
Let's go back. Let's see if we can get through this examination over the next 7 hours. We have 7 hours of time together, exclusive of breaks. But I'm letting you know now, if this is a wasted time because you don't answer the question, we've lost the witness. Mr. Rowe, we've lost your witness on video.
I can tell.
All right, Ekwan, I'm going to take a break so that the lawyers can talk to their client, and I mean Mr. West.
All right, let me try to find him.
And just let the record reflect, we didn't lose the witness. He shut off his video and he shut off his computer.
I'm going to take a 5-minute break in order to try to collect on our side what we're going to do next.
He never came back to the deposition.
I got people to heal. I got diets to change.
There is no world in which what he just did doesn't benefit my client and our case.
That's the dumbest shit. Are you crazy?
If he goes to a jury trial, the jury would find, ultimately in our favor, this is a win.
No.
I think this was all mapped out like in a sketchbook in his mind.
What does that hat say?
About how this was going to go.
No, you can't ask me for nothing, boy.
This is a show. He thinks that we're all just players in a giant movie created by Kanye West.
You just entered my movie.
And he was in for a rude awakening.
This is not your show. This is my deposition.
You crazy?
Ultimately, the parties settled amicably. The deposition was the most important development in the case, demonstrating to both Kanye and his lawyers, we can't take this case to a jury in LA with Kanye acting like this. The terms of the settlement negotiated between the parties is confidential, but the My Channel founders are satisfied with the result, and they both moved on, and justice was ultimately done.
Kanye West certainly thought because he was a celebrity, the rules of regular people don't apply to him. He also used that power to trample on a little company, probably never thinking that he'd be called into account and have to pay the price.
Kanye assumed the My Channel founders were not going to fight back when he stole their technology. He knew that they were vulnerable. They can hold their heads up high because they held Kanye West accountable.
There is so much interest in this high-profile case between these two Hollywood megastars. Amber Heard is alleging that her ex-husband, actor Johnny Depp, was a drug-addicted abuser. All the while, Depp is saying Heard is lying about all of that.
These accusations destroyed Johnny's career and reputation, and did so in an instant. The stakes could not be higher. Johnny had to get his name back.
Your Honor, we call Mr. John C. Depp.
Can you please tell the jury why you're here today?
About 6 years ago, Ms. Heard brought these disturbing criminal acts against me that were not based in any species of truth. I've never struck Ms. Heard. I've never struck a woman in my life. Nothing of the kind had ever happened. For me to come up here and spill the truth is quite exposing, but I know that I'm doing the right thing.
This trial was a huge deal. Johnny and Amber met on the set of The Rum Diary. They got married in 2015. But Amber filed for divorce after 15 months.
Both parties put out a joint statement saying, our relationship was tumultuous, but it was based in love.
In 2018, Amber Heard published an op-ed in the Washington Post suggesting that she was a victim of sexual violence in addition to physical violence 2 years earlier.
Now, she didn't mention Johnny Depp's name, but it's pretty obvious who she's talking about. And that's when there was all this speculation about Johnny Depp. Did he abuse Amber Heard?
The ramifications of this op-ed were immediate and devastating. Disney fired him from the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie. These accusations destroyed Johnny's career and reputation.
Johnny Depp claimed that he would never do the things that Amber Heard claimed he did. And he ultimately decided that he wanted to pursue a defamation claim against Ms. Heard. He was seeking $50 million in compensatory and punitive damages.
It became a huge frenzy. This was Johnny Depp and Amber Heard exposed, and you wanted to hang on to every single word that they both were saying.
Mr. Depp, I'd like to now turn to your relationship with Ms. Heard. Mr. Depp, have you ever physically assaulted Ms. Heard?
Never.
Have you ever sexually assaulted Ms. Heard?
Never. Certainly not.
What have you lost as a result of Ms. Heard making these allegations against you?
Nothing less than everything.
This case was he said, she said, and Johnny knew that he would have to show that she was not telling the truth, that he was the victim.
When did Ms. Heard's behavior towards you begin to change?
These little digs would escalate into a full-scale argument. Miss Heard, in her anger, she would strike out. She would. It could begin with a slap. It could begin with a shove. It could begin with, throwing a TV remote at my head. As it escalated, I removed myself from the situation so that it couldn't continue. I would just go and lock myself in the bathroom or anywhere that she couldn't get into.
Did there come a time when you and Ms. Heard started recording your arguments?
Yes. She had completely denied things she'd said directly to my face. So I said, I'm going to record us. And I did.
I was hitting you. I was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched.
Don't tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You get punched. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not deck you. I was hitting you. You're a baby.
And
you
physical
are
fights?
such a baby.
Because you start physical fights?
I did start a physical fight.
Yeah, you did, so I had to get the f*** out of there.
Those recordings confirmed that she would get violent with him. And his instinct is not to fight, but to run away and hide.
I'm sorry I hit you. I didn't mean to hit you.
We wanted to deconstruct major pieces of her narrative through her own words. What is this, a picture of Mr. Depp?
A wound from Miss Heard taking my cigarette, and she stubbed it out on my cheek.
What's reflected in this photograph?
Nailed me on the cheekbone.
What's reflected in this picture?
This was taken in the surgeon's office.
How did it come to be that your finger became injured?
She was banging on the doors and screaming obscenities and wanting to have a physical altercation. And so I was leaning like this in the chair. She threw the large bottle and it made contact and shattered everywhere. And then I looked down and realized that the tip of my finger had been severed.
Morning, Mr. Depp.
Morning, Mr. Roddenborn.
You would agree that you found drugs and alcohol at an early stage in your life?
Certainly, yes, I did.
And one of your good friends that you've taken drugs with before is Marilyn Manson, right?
Yes, we've drank together. We've had cocaine together maybe a couple of times.
Pills, right?
I once gave Marilyn Manson a pill so that he would stop talking so much. Sorry.
All right. I get it. And you would sometimes drink whiskey in the mornings too, right?
Isn't happy hour anytime?
Johnny's use of humor really undermined whatever serious point Amber's counsel was trying to make. We wanted to humanize Johnny before the jury so they could understand why hitting the woman he loved, which is something that he's just not capable of. But the one thing that we're concerned about is whether he might lose his temper. The other side is going to do everything possible to get Johnny to show anger.
Can you please bring up Defendant's Exhibit 638? Your Honor, move for the admission of this video into evidence.
What happened?
You want to see crazy? I'll give you That's crazy. Oh, you're crazy. Oh, you're crazy.
Have you drunk this whole thing this morning?
Oh, you got this going. You got this going?
Just started it.
Oh, really? Really?
You would agree that you were violent in that clip, correct?
Clearly I was having a bad time. I did assault a couple of cabinets, but I did not touch Miss Heard.
You may have been drunk in that video, correct?
There's a possibility of that, yes, sir.
You poured yourself a mega pint of red wine, correct?
A mega pint?
Yeah.
I poured myself a large glass of wine.
Right.
I thought it necessary.
One of the things that lawyers try to do on cross-examination is to maintain control of the witness. And that's something that Johnny simply did not allow him to do.
Your Honor, we'd like to call Amber Heard to the stand.
For Amber's testimony, we were prepared for her to get up there and describe numerous incidents of alleged abuse.
He just hit me over and over and over again. He's punching me with a closed fist, punching me, pounding the back of my head, pounding it with his fist. And I thought, this is how I die. He's gonna kill me now.
She said things that we knew we would be able to effectively disprove. We were going to argue that there was no evidence of physical injuries of the type that Amber described. We were looking forward to the cross-examination.
Be seated. Cross-examination.
We wanted to show the jury that Amber had a history of not telling the truth. If you can show that someone's not telling the truth about a few things, then it's not unreasonable for the jury to infer that the rest is not true.
Good afternoon, Miss Heard.
Good afternoon.
Including that Miss Heard deliberately lied about donating all $7 million of the divorce settlement to charity.
Sitting here today, Miss Heard, you still haven't donated the $7 million divorce settlement to charity. Isn't that right?
Incorrect. I pledged the entirety No,
of the
Ms. Heard,
settlement, $7
that's
million
not my
to
question.
charity, and I
Ms.
intend to
Heard,
fulfill
Ms. Heard,
those obligations.
Ms. Heard, that's not my question. Sitting here today, you have not donated the $7 million, donated, not pledged, donated the $7 million divorce settlement to charity.
I use pledge and donation synonymous with one another. They
But
do
I
the same
don't.
thing.
Ms. Heard, I don't use it synonymously. So as of today, you have not donated, paid $7 million of your divorce settlement to charity, right?
I have not been able to fulfill those obligations yet. I pledged the entirety.
But you
to
didn't
charity.
donate it.
Unfortunately,
You didn't donate it. It's a yes or no.
I haven't been able to to fulfill those
So that's a no,
obligations.
right, Ms. Heard?
I made the pledge. I want to be very clear. I pledged the entirety. I haven't been able to fulfill those pledges because I've been sued.
You had all of the $7 million for 13 months before Mr. Depp sued you, and you chose not to pay it to the charities you pledged it to. Is that correct, Ms.
I
Heard?
disagree with your characterization of that.
We hope the jury would realize that if this person is capable of lying about giving money to sick children, she's capable of lying about abuse.
Mr. Depp wears rings on every finger, doesn't he, Ms. Heard?
That's my experience, yes.
And they're not delicate rings, are they?
No, they are not.
You testified to an incident in March of 2013 where Mr. Depp hit you several times in the face wearing rings. Do you recall that?
That's correct.
You testified that this is the picture you took after that incident, right, Ms. Heard?
Yes, that was one where he grabbed me.
And hit you in the face so many times that you don't remember. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And there's no injuries to your face in this picture, are there?
Not that this picture shows.
Despite hitting you several times that you lost count with rings on his fingers.
That's correct.
In my opinion, there would have been not only serious injuries, but there would have been medical records. But there wasn't any medical records. That's why it was an incredibly difficult case to prove, because you are proving a negative. You are proving that no abuse ever happened. We could put on a perfect case and still lose this.
Ms. Heard, you testified yesterday that this is a photograph taken of you on May 21st, 2016.
Yes, that's correct. This is my face after Johnny threw a phone at it. My best friend took pictures of my face because the cops were coming.
If we could please do a split screen. You testified yesterday that the only difference between these two photographs is that the light was turned on.
That's what it appears to be, yes.
Isn't it true you just edited these photographs?
No, I've never edited a photograph.
Didn't you just enhance the saturation for one of these photos to make your face look more red?
No, that's incorrect. I didn't touch it.
You were sitting here in this courtroom when Officer Melissa Sines testified that she did not see any injuries on you that night, correct?
I heard her testify she did not consider this injured.
No. Officer Sines testified that she met with you and she did not see any injuries on your face. Officer Tyler Haddon also testified no injuries on your face on May 21, 2016. Isn't that correct?
They both said that they did not consider me injured.
You were also in this courtroom when Alejandro Romero, who worked at the front desk, testified that he didn't see any swelling or bruises on your face when you were talking to him at the front desk. Isn't that correct?
I know that's what he testified to, yes.
Can we please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 356?
I can't promise you I won't get physical again. God, I sometimes get so mad I lose it.
Ms. Heard, that's you and Mr. Depp on that recording, correct?
That's correct.
And you told Mr. Depp, quote, "I can't promise you that I won't get physical," end quote. Correct?
That's correct.
And you also told Mr. Depp that sometimes you get so mad you lose it, correct?
That's correct.
You got physical with Mr. Depp often during your relationship, didn't you?
I had to defend myself as best I could. Didn't seem to make much of a difference.
You struck Mr. Depp multiple times during your relationship, didn't you, Ms. Heard?
There were many times I had to use my body to defend myself, and that included swinging wherever I could. If it meant I could get away, absolutely. You bet I would.
Since your testimony under oath that you never struck Mr. Depp as the initial aggressor?
I might be the first person to have been the first one to slap, but I wouldn't say I was the initial aggressor.
You just couldn't control yourself, could you, Ms. Heard?
I tried to defend myself when I could.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right.
I understand we have a verdict.
We were all exhausted. Then the nervousness really set in. No matter how well you think the evidence has come in, it's always up to the jury.
As to the statement, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Yes. As to the statement, then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Yes. As to the statement, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes.
Ultimately, there was solid evidence that Amber Heard's version of what happened is demonstrably false. And the jury felt the same way.
All right, thank you.
Johnny was not with us when we learned of the verdict. He had a prior engagement, but we spoke to him afterwards.
He was elated, and he sounded as if the weight of the world was off of his shoulders. I mean, he sounded like a kid. He was thrilled. After the verdict, Johnny had no interest in bankrupting Amber, so ultimately it settled and she paid $1 million.
It's truly been a victory for Johnny Depp. He has appeared to completely bounce back. He's starring in movies again, and he was able to redeem himself and take back his reputation.
I admire Johnny tremendously. It's a victory for the truth.
The sun had just begun to set over the quiet suburban streets of Riverside, California, when a call came into the dispatch center that would haunt the city for decades. It was March 12th, 1995. A jogger had stumbled upon something that froze her blood, something that should never have been there, tucked beneath a pile of autumn leaves in the shadow of an old oak tree. The police arrived within minutes, their boots crunching against the cold dirt, flashlights cutting through the twilight as they approached the lifeless form. It was a young woman, no more than 23, lying face down, her eyes wide open in silent terror, a faint trace of blood on her temple. Her purse lay abandoned a few feet away, the strap twisted as if there had been a struggle, but the scene was eerily quiet, almost staged. The initial assessment would later mark it as a homicide, but at that moment, the officers could only stare, stunned. Riverside had seen its share of petty crime, burglaries, and occasional assaults, but nothing like this, nothing so deliberate, so chilling. The woman was identified within hours as Emily Carter, a college graduate with ambitions of becoming a journalist, known to friends and family for her bright laugh and relentless curiosity. She had vanished from her apartment that very morning, leaving behind a half-finished cup of coffee, her keys on the counter, and a note to meet a friend at the local cafe, a meeting she never made. As news spread, the community reeled. Flyers appeared overnight on lampposts and bulletin boards. Have you seen Emily Carter? The local papers ran the story with grainy black and white photographs, highlighting her wide smile, the innocence of youth forever frozen in time. Families across Riverside whispered in hushed tones, windows drawn against the chill, wondering how such a horror could strike in their quiet neighborhoods. Detectives combed through her life, retracing every step, every phone call, every social interaction. Emily's routine had been unremarkable, predictable even, which made the brutality of her death all the more baffling. No known enemies, No signs of robbery beyond the scattered contents of her purse. And yet, the murderer had left a mark, something calculated in the way the body was positioned, the lack of fingerprints, the absence of DNA evidence strong enough to identify a culprit. It was a crime that seemed to vanish into the shadows almost as soon as it had occurred. The investigation began in earnest, with Riverside Police Detective Mark Holloway taking the lead. Holloway was a seasoned investigator, a man who had seen the darkest corners of human behavior, yet even he found Emily's murder unnerving. He noted the subtleties of the crime scene, the absence of a weapon, the faint drag marks suggesting movement after death, and the peculiar lack of struggle marks on the surrounding foliage. It was almost as if the perpetrator had planned the scene, sculpting terror with meticulous precision. Witnesses were scarce. The jogger who had found Emily provided a shaky account, describing a quiet morning disturbed only by the sight of her body. Nearby residents reported nothing unusual, no sounds of struggle, no suspicious vehicles. It was as if Emily had simply disappeared from the world and reappeared to meet her end in silence. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the investigation seemed to stall. Leads evaporated. Tips poured in from the public, many trivial, some disturbingly personal, yet none cracked the case. Fingerprints failed to match any known criminal records. DNA testing in the mid-1990s was in its infancy, yielding only partial profiles that could not narrow suspects. Detectives interviewed friends, family, coworkers, and strangers who had crossed Emily's path, looking for anomalies, for a glimpse of motive, a hint of obsession, any spark that could ignite the investigation. Yet every avenue led to dead ends. Holloway and his team watched the city's fear and grief morph into frustration and dread. Riverside, usually calm and orderly, now carried the weight of a dark question. Who among them could commit such a calculated act of violence? Months later, the case grew cold. Emily's name was whispered in classrooms and coffee shops, her story repeated in tones that mixed sorrow and disbelief. Memorials appeared in her honor, candles flickering in the night breeze, photographs taped to trees, hands clutching mementos, desperate to keep her memory alive. The police file thickened with reports and statements, each one a thread that led nowhere. Holloway revisited the scene countless times, walking the streets Emily had walked, retracing her steps, imagining the terror she might have felt, hoping for a clue that had been overlooked. But time, relentless and unforgiving, seemed to smother the trail, and with each passing year, the hope of resolution dimmed. The case became a whisper, a cautionary tale parents told their children. Never walk alone, never trust strangers, be vigilant, because evil had no face, no warning, no reason. Then, in the early months of 1996, a peculiar lead emerged. A local mechanic reported seeing a man near the area of Emily's disappearance. Someone who matched a vague description Emily had given friends about an unnerving encounter in a grocery store a week prior to her death. The man's behavior had been strange, intrusive, his presence lingering in ways that set Emily on edge. Unfortunately, his identity remained unknown, a fleeting shadow that could not be traced. Holloway pursued this lead with dogged persistence, interviewing dozens of individuals, reviewing old payphone records, canvassing local businesses, yet the man remained elusive, his existence almost spectral. It was the first real thread in a tapestry of dead ends, a spark of hope that fizzled as quickly as it ignited. As the 1990s progressed, technology began to creep into the investigation. Early DNA analysis, fingerprint digitization, and rudimentary computer databases offered faint glimmers of promise, but the case resisted all attempts at resolution. Riverside's police department kept Emily's story alive, occasionally reassigning officers to comb through old files, cross-referencing new data, and scanning for patterns invisible to the naked eye. Each year that passed was a reminder of the killer's cunning, a silent taunt echoing through the halls of the station. Holloway retired in 2002, leaving the case to younger detectives, but the files remained, marked unsolved, a permanent scar on the department's record. The community adapted. Life went on. Yet the shadow of Emily's murder lingered like a low hum, a background vibration in the fabric of everyday life. Parents warned their children, friends speculated, strangers whispered, and the case became more than a mystery. It became a symbol of fear, of loss, of justice deferred indefinitely. By the time the decade turned, the Riverside Cold Case Unit had formally classified Emily's death as a cold case. New methods were on the horizon. Advancements in forensic science promised tools that the 1990s could not offer. Holloway's notes, meticulous and detailed, were revisited with fresh eyes. Analysts began to apply emerging DNA techniques to the tiny fragments collected from Emily's clothing, hair, and the scene itself. It was painstaking work, the type that required patience, precision, and a willingness to stare into darkness for years without guarantee of success. Friends and family, now weary from decades of uncertainty, watched from the sidelines as law enforcement quietly revisited every stone, every shred, every whisper of evidence. Riverside still carried the scar of Emily's murder, a community forever changed, but there remained a stubborn ember of hope, the belief that time, no matter how long, could not completely bury the truth. And yet, for all the effort, the investigation felt like chasing ghosts. Each lead was a phantom, each witness a memory, each trace of evidence a shadow cast long and thin over a wall of uncertainty. Emily's life, vibrant and full of promise, had been extinguished in a way that denied closure, and the city felt the weight of that absence in its collective heartbeat. Riverside streets, lined with the soft glow of street lamps and the distant hum of traffic, seemed innocuous to the casual observer. But for those who remembered, who had looked too closely, every corner held a question, every park a reminder, every breeze carried the whisper of an unsolved horror. The police files, stacked and dust-covered, became a silent testimony to human cruelty, to the fragility of safety, to the resilience of those who refused to forget. The years passed. Emily's story endured in local lore, her image immortalized in faded photographs, her name invoked in annual memorials, her absence felt in classrooms, workplaces, and homes across Riverside. Detectives came and went, technology evolved, DNA testing advanced, yet the killer's identity remained shrouded in secrecy, a puzzle whose pieces refused to align. Every unresolved question became a weight, a silent specter hovering over the community, demanding recognition even as time sought to obscure it. Holloway, now long retired, occasionally revisited the case in dreams and memories, reliving the moment the call came in, the sight of Emily's body, the helplessness that had gripped him as he realized that justice was not merely delayed. It was suspended indefinitely. And so, California 1995 held its breath, a city shadowed by the memory of a life taken too soon, by a crime unsolved, by a cold case that refused to yield its secrets. Emily Carter, forever 23, became more than a victim. She became a symbol, a cautionary tale, a lingering question mark that echoed through the streets and hearts of Riverside. Every passing year added layers to the mystery. Every failed lead deepened the intrigue. Every whispered speculation fanned the embers of fear and fascination. The city lived with the shadow, and in doing so, it kept the memory alive, refusing to let the killer's anonymity erase the humanity of the life lost. Years rolled on, and Emily Carter's name lingered in Riverside like a persistent shadow. The city tried to move forward, yet every street, every park, every familiar corner carried the unspoken memory of that March morning in 1995. In 2005, a new team of detectives, part of the now formalized cold case unit, began revisiting unsolved cases, Emily's being among the highest priority. They approached the files with fresh eyes, scrutinizing every line of Holloway's notes, every sketch of the crime scene, every witness statement. The old photographs were examined under new lighting, the tiniest details magnified. Dust-covered envelopes containing physical evidence, strands of hair, smudged fingerprints, a fragment of fabric, were cataloged, tested, and retested. For the first time, Riverside felt that a breakthrough, however faint, might actually be possible. One of the detectives, Sarah Linton, noticed something that had been overlooked for a decade. A single footprint near the edge of the pile of leaves where Emily's body had been found. The print had been faint, partially erased by the jogger's discovery, dismissed as inconclusive at the time. But under modern forensic analysis, it revealed characteristics unique enough to suggest a shoe brand that was rare, sold in limited stores, primarily in Southern California. The discovery sparked a renewed sense of urgency. Detectives began canvassing old shoe sales records, contacting local stores, tracking purchases made in Riverside and surrounding counties. Each lead was painstakingly followed, yet the trail twisted like a serpent, leading to closed shops, vanished customers, and dead-end addresses. It was as if the city itself was protecting the perpetrator, keeping him hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, forensic science had leaped forward. DNA testing, once rudimentary, now offered the potential for matches even decades old. Tiny skin cells, long dismissed as irrelevant or too degraded, could now be amplified, analyzed, and compared against a growing national database. Emily's hair and clothing were submitted, and the lab results came back with a fragmentary profile. It wasn't enough to name a suspect outright, but it narrowed the possibilities, focusing the investigation on a select group of individuals who had either resided in or traveled through Riverside in 1995. Detectives cross-referenced employment records, criminal databases, and public registries. Slowly, a picture emerged, a shadowy figure, peripheral in society, unnoticed, yet present, lurking on the edges of Emily's world in ways that had never been suspected. Witness interviews also uncovered subtle clues long buried. A friend of Emily's remembered an unusual encounter days before her disappearance. A man who had approached Emily outside the local cafe where she often studied. He had seemed casual, almost friendly, yet there was a stiffness in his movements, a cold calculation behind his eyes. Emily had laughed nervously and walked away, dismissing it as harmless attention. But in hindsight, the interaction carried the tension of a predator testing boundaries. Another witness reported seeing a dark-colored sedan parked unusually long near Emily's apartment building that week, a detail overlooked at the time because no crime had been immediately apparent. Every memory, every observation, every small oddity suddenly took on new significance. By 2010, Riverside's cold case unit had integrated digital mapping into the investigation. Patterns emerged when plotting the locations of Emily's known routes, sightings of suspicious vehicles, and the residence addresses of persons of interest. A cluster appeared in the eastern neighborhoods, an area Emily frequently passed through on her morning walks. Investigators theorized that the killer might have been familiar with her routine, watching, waiting for the precise moment. It was a chilling thought that someone had been stalking her movements, planning her death with meticulous care. Riverside streets, once ordinary, now seemed charged with menace in retrospect, each lamppost and corner imbued with the ghost of 1995. The breakthrough came in 2015, 20 years after Emily's death. Advances in forensic genealogy allowed DNA fragments to be compared against public family trees, opening a path once deemed impossible. The fragmentary profile from the 1995 evidence matched a distant relative in a small town outside Riverside. Investigators traced connections, examining family histories, addresses, employment records, even social behaviors. It was painstaking detective work, assembling a puzzle across decades, with pieces scattered in time and space. As the team delved deeper, they uncovered a man whose presence had barely registered in Emily's life, a neighbor of her friend's cousin, a mechanic who had worked late nights and known the back roads intimately, a man whose existence had been largely anonymous, yet whose actions had left an indelible mark. Detectives approached the man cautiously, knowing that decades had passed and any confrontation could be volatile. Interviews revealed inconsistencies, small lies that crumbled under scrutiny, behaviors that seemed calculated, rehearsed. Evidence from his past, minor thefts, odd encounters with neighbors, a fascination with true crime magazines, painted a portrait of someone capable of planning, concealing, and executing a crime with chilling precision. Riverside's cold case unit began cross-referencing the man's whereabouts with the time of Emily's disappearance. Phone records, employment logs, and even grocery store receipts were meticulously examined. Every discrepancy, every unaccounted hour, became a thread in the web, tightening around the suspect. Community reaction was intense when the arrest finally came in early 2026. News outlets broadcast the story. A killer, long hidden in the folds of ordinary life, had been unmasked. Families who had endured decades of uncertainty, parents who had whispered warnings to their children, friends who had mourned silently, were forced to confront the fact that the person responsible for Emily's death had walked among them unnoticed for 30 years. The arrest shocked Riverside, reigniting fear, fascination, and grief in equal measure. Every detail of the investigation, every breakthrough, every painstaking reconstruction now seemed almost cinematic in its unfolding, a testament to persistence, technology, and the refusal to let a crime fade into obscurity. But even as justice approached, questions lingered. How had the killer remained invisible for so long? How many near misses had occurred, moments when he might have been caught, but chance or distraction had allowed him to slip away? Detectives reflected on the delicate balance of luck and vigilance, on the countless hours of dedication that ultimately brought closure to a case once thought permanently cold. Riverside, meanwhile, grappled with the duality of relief and terror. Relief that Emily's murderer had been identified, terror that such darkness had existed in their midst for so long. The arrest also prompted a deeper examination of the 1990s criminal landscape. Law enforcement acknowledged the limitations of past technology and methodology, recognizing that countless other cases might remain unresolved, victims forgotten, families in perpetual limbo. Emily's case became a benchmark, a demonstration that persistence, modern science, and relentless inquiry could crack even the coldest of cases. The story of Riverside's long shadow, 20 years of unanswered questions, 30 years of mystery, captured national attention, drawing parallels with other high-profile cold cases, emphasizing the human need for resolution and the enduring power of memory. Meanwhile, Emily's friends and family, now decades older, experienced a complex tangle of emotions. Grief, long dormant, resurfaced in waves. Relief mingled with anger, sorrow with a grim satisfaction. The arrest did not restore Emily's life, nor did it erase the trauma, but it brought a measure of clarity, a tangible acknowledgement that the truth, though delayed, had not been denied. Riverside held memorial services anew, candles flickering against the twilight, photos revisited, stories retold. The city collectively exhaled, aware that the shadow had been lifted, but conscious that the darkness of human cruelty could never be fully erased. Even as the case closed in a legal sense, the psychological impact remained. Riverside residents reported renewed vigilance. Communities reevaluated safety protocols, and parents told their children more pointedly that evil could hide anywhere, in anyone, even in someone seemingly ordinary. Emily's murder became more than a story of tragedy. It became a lesson, a stark reminder of both human fragility and resilience. Law enforcement agencies across the state began implementing new strategies for cold cases, inspired by the success in Riverside, applying forensic genealogy, revisiting old files, and integrating new technology in the relentless pursuit of justice. The killer's arrest also shed light on behavior patterns, psychological profiling, and the subtle cues that often go unnoticed until years later. Experts reviewed the crime scene photographs, witness statements, and behavioral anomalies, piecing together a profile that matched known sociopathic tendencies. Meticulous planning, charm masking intent, predatory observation, and the ability to vanish into normalcy. Riverside, in reflecting on this, came to understand the terrifying reality that evil often operates quietly, invisibly, leaving traces only to be uncovered with patience, technology, and unwavering attention. And so, as the city looked back over 30 years, Emily Carter's story evolved from a cautionary tale into a chronicle of perseverance. Detectives, journalists, and community members alike recognize that the journey toward justice is rarely linear. Time obscures, memory fades, but evidence, no matter how cold, eventually whispers its secrets. Riverside's experience became a beacon to other towns, a reminder that no matter how long it takes, truth persists, and that even in the darkest shadows, light can find a way. The streets where Emily once walked became hallowed in memory, familiar paths now traced with reverence and wariness. Riverside learned to carry the weight of history while looking forward, to acknowledge past horrors without surrendering to fear. Emily's laughter, once abruptly silenced, now echoed in stories, memorials, and reflections, a reminder that a life interrupted could still inspire, guide, and educate. Even in the heart of unresolved darkness, the power of discovery, of persistence, and of human determination prevailed. The breakthrough in Riverside sent shockwaves through the city, yet it also unleashed a tidal wave of questions that no one could answer easily. The man in custody, long an invisible shadow within the community, had been living among neighbors, co-workers, even friends, without arousing suspicion. How could someone capable of such calculated violence go unnoticed for 3 decades? Detectives pored over old interviews, photographs, and reports, searching for missed cues, subtle behaviors, tiny inconsistencies that might have been overlooked. It became increasingly clear that the killer had perfected the art of blending in, mastering the ordinary while concealing extraordinary malevolence. Community reaction was a mixture of relief, disbelief, and outrage. Parents gathered in local schools to speak to children about vigilance, recounting the decades-old story with a gravity that left no room for innocence. Friends of Emily, once quiet and subdued, found their voices amplified, demanding answers, demanding accountability, demanding to understand how such evil could persist so long without detection. Riverside's media outlets seized on every detail. The slow unraveling of a cold case, the meticulous work of forensic genealogists, the small missteps and overlooked leads of years past. Headlines screamed across print and digital platforms. California cold case cracked after 30 years. Community stunned. Invisible killer among us. Riverside confronts the past. Justice delayed, not denied. The Emily Carter case. Detectives continued to reconstruct the timeline meticulously. Emily's last hours were replayed with forensic precision. Surveillance footage, once grainy and easily dismissed, was enhanced and analyzed frame by frame. The streets she walked were mapped against sightings, car registrations, and neighborhood activity logs. Patterns emerged, repeated glances, shadowy figures at a distance, moments of fleeting attention that no one had noticed at the time. The killer had studied her, anticipated her movements, and executed his plan with an almost surgical detachment. Riverside had been a stage for a crime rehearsed for weeks, perhaps months, a horror enacted in silence and observed only by fate. As the legal proceedings began, experts were brought in to discuss behavioral patterns, the psychology of long-hidden killers, and the methodology behind forensic breakthroughs. Riverside listened, captivated and horrified. The discussions were clinical yet chilling. How a predator could mask obsession with casual friendliness. How meticulous planning could evade detection for decades. How forensic genealogy and modern DNA techniques could finally pierce the veil of anonymity. The courtroom became a theater of revelation, each exhibit, each testimony peeling back layers of a hidden life. Friends and family were forced to confront not only the man who had taken Emily from them, but the unsettling reality of how easily someone could navigate society undetected while harboring violent intent. Inside the cold case unit, detectives reviewed every step, every decision, every file that had once seemed to lead nowhere. Patterns of oversight became apparent, not out of negligence, but because the technology, methods, and understanding at the time were insufficient. Fingerprints that were previously unusable were now digitalized and matched. Fragments of DNA, once overlooked, were amplified and sequenced, and decades-old witness statements were reinterpreted with hindsight. The case, once frozen in time, had been thawed by patience, persistence, and scientific evolution. The very tools that were unavailable in 1995 had now turned the tide, shifting a cold case into a resolved, shocking revelation. Yet even as the investigation reached its climax, the community struggled with unease. How many more unknown perpetrators lingered unseen, waiting in plain sight? Riverside, once confident in its safety, was now acutely aware of the fragility of security. Neighbors who had once waved casually now watched one another with a cautious eye. Children walked to school accompanied by parents, paths once routine, now laden with suspicion. Emily's story had become more than a cold case. It had become a cautionary tale, a lens through which the city examined itself. It revealed the invisible threads that connect crime, community, and perception, and the devastating consequences when one goes unnoticed. The arrest also brought unexpected revelations from those closest to the suspect. Former neighbors recounted odd habits, late-night excursions, unexplained absences, an obsessive interest in local news reports, and a collection of true crime literature that, in retrospect, seemed to foreshadow the violence he had enacted. Each anecdote was scrutinized, matched against the timeline of Emily's disappearance, and cataloged in the cold case files. Riverside residents, previously unaware, now realized that a predator had walked among them, blending seamlessly with ordinary life. The sense of betrayal, the shock that someone could be so familiar, yet so dangerous, compounded the community's grief. The trial itself became a gripping narrative of meticulous evidence, painstaking reconstructions, and emotional testimonies. Witnesses recounted events from decades prior with precision, supported by corroborating evidence revealed through modern technology. The jury listened, captivated by the convergence of time, science, and human perseverance. Forensic genealogists testified on the breakthrough methods that had identified familial links, DNA profiles, and genetic markers that had remained hidden for 30 years. Every revelation was a testament to the intersection of human determination and scientific progress, a painstaking, relentless march toward truth. Outside the courtroom, Riverside remained haunted by the memory of Emily. Memorials multiplied, gatherings commemorated her life, and journalists revisited the story, emphasizing not only the horror, but also the extraordinary persistence that had brought closure. Parents, teachers, and children grappled with the realization that evil often wears a familiar face and can persist unnoticed for years. Emily's friends, many now adults with their own families, recounted the laughter, the vibrancy, and the aspirations that had been abruptly cut short, and in doing so, they reinforced the humanity behind the headlines. The case, once abstract and clinical in files and reports, became deeply personal, a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of memory. Detectives continued to dig deeper, exploring how the killer's life intersected with Emily's and whether other incidents could be connected. Subtle patterns emerged. Similar behaviors reported in nearby towns, unaccounted for absences, and minor offenses previously dismissed as inconsequential. Investigators began to speculate whether Emily's case was an isolated incident or part of a broader, darker pattern. Every detail was scrutinized, every record analyzed, as the team sought to understand not only the act itself but the mind behind it. Riverside had been exposed to the quiet danger of unseen malevolence, and the realization reverberated across the city, chilling in its implication. Even as the trial progressed, there was an undercurrent of reflection on the role of time in crime solving. 3 decades had passed, yet modern forensic science had resurrected the truth from obscurity. The persistence of detectives, The meticulous preservation of evidence and the courage of witnesses had converged to pierce the veil of time. Riverside learned a profound lesson. No crime, no matter how long hidden, is beyond the reach of justice. Emily Carter's story, frozen in tragedy for 30 years, had finally moved toward resolution, though the wound it inflicted on the city would linger indefinitely. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric yet somber. Residents debated, discussed, and reflected on the implications of the case. Parents held their children closer, recalling the warnings whispered in hushed tones over the decades. Friends shared memories, photographs, and personal stories, breathing life into the young woman whose absence had been felt so profoundly. The city collectively exhaled, but the weight of what had occurred, the calculated precision, the decades-long anonymity of the killer, remained a stark reminder of human vulnerability. For the cold case unit, the resolution marked both triumph and reflection. Detectives examined procedural improvements, considering how earlier detection might have prevented the tragedy. Every report, every interview, every step of the investigation was dissected to learn lessons for future cases. Riverside's police department integrated these findings into training programs, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, evidence preservation, and the relentless pursuit of justice, no matter how many years had passed. Emily's case became a model, a benchmark demonstrating that patience, persistence, and scientific innovation could overturn decades of uncertainty. As the trial neared its conclusion, the human element remained at the forefront. Emily's parents, friends, and colleagues experienced the full spectrum of emotions: grief, relief, anger, disbelief. Riverside as a whole shared in this collective journey, a city forced to confront the hidden darkness that had lived among them for so long. The narrative of Emily's life, her aspirations, and her untimely death became inseparable from the story of the community itself. Riverside had been changed forever, marked by tragedy, yet also illuminated by the extraordinary efforts that had brought a cold case to resolution. Even after conviction, lingering questions persisted. How many moments had passed where intervention might have occurred? How many subtle signs had gone unnoticed, lost to the limitations of memory, technology, or circumstance? Riverside grappled with these uncomfortable truths, knowing that while justice had been served, the process revealed vulnerabilities inherent in society. Yet in facing these truths, the city found resolve, a commitment to vigilance, to community awareness, and to honoring the memory of those lost by ensuring that future generations would be safer, more informed, and more prepared. The story of Emily Carter, once a grim whisper across Riverside, became a powerful narrative of resilience, persistence, and justice. The combination of modern science, determined investigators, and a community unwilling to forget had transformed decades of uncertainty into resolution. Yet the impact went beyond the courtroom. Riverside had been forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that evil can persist quietly, blending into ordinary life, waiting for its moment. In recognizing this, the city embraced both caution and hope, understanding that vigilance and dedication could counteract even the most hidden malevolence. And so, 30 years after Emily Carter's life was violently taken, Riverside stood at the intersection of memory and justice, grappling with the enormity of loss and the triumph of perseverance. The streets she once walked carried echoes of laughter and whispers of fear, but also the indelible mark of human determination. The cold case, once frozen in time, had finally yielded its secrets, yet the shadow it cast reminded all that the pursuit of truth is never complete, the search for justice never-ending, and the memory of those lost forever etched into the fabric of the community they once called home. The courtroom buzzed with tension, the air thick with anticipation, whispers bouncing off the walls like ripples across water. 30 years of unanswered questions, decades of silent torment, now hung in the balance as the trial of Riverside's most elusive killer commenced. The suspect sat impassively, his face unreadable, a mask of calm concealing the storm beneath. Outside, the city teetered between relief and unease, crowds gathering on sidewalks, reporters lining the street, cameras capturing every movement, every expression, every subtle gesture that might betray the man who had haunted their lives for so long. Riverside had waited decades for this moment, and now that it had arrived, the weight of expectation was suffocating. The prosecution began with a meticulous reconstruction of the crime, a narrative that carried the audience back to that March morning in 1995. Photographs of Emily's lifeless body, the scattered purse, the faint drag marks across the dirt, were presented with unflinching clarity. Witnesses recounted the discovery of the body, their voices wavering, eyes glistening with memories that refused to fade. The jogger who had stumbled upon Emily described the instant of horror, how the world had seemed to tilt and hush, how fear had settled like a physical weight in her chest. Each testimony, each image, each detail was carefully curated to transport the jury, the city, and anyone watching into the chilling reality of that morning. Then came the forensic evidence, a revelation decades in the making. The DNA fragments that had lain dormant for 30 years were amplified, sequenced, and matched through advanced genealogical techniques. Specialists explained the painstaking process, the blending of science and persistence, the delicate extraction of truth from what was once deemed insufficient. Fingerprints, once unreadable, were digitized and confirmed. The rare shoe print traced to purchases in the local area in the months leading up to the crime. Every piece of evidence was a thread, weaving together the narrative of a killer who had lurked unnoticed, hidden in plain sight while leaving subtle, almost imperceptible clues scattered like breadcrumbs across Riverside. Emily's friends and family were called to testify, their voices trembling with grief, anger, and the persistent weight of unanswered questions. Her mother recounted the last conversation, the half-finished cup of coffee, the expectation that Emily would meet a friend later that morning. A mundane plan turned fatal. Her father spoke of the years of silent suffering, the sleepless nights, the constant wondering of what might have been, the relentless search for closure. Friends described her laughter, her ambitions, the way she had illuminated the lives of those around her, and how the absence of her presence left an unfillable void. Each word was a reminder not only of loss, but of the profound impact one life can have and the enduring shadow cast by its untimely end. The defense, calm and calculated, attempted to unravel the narrative, questioning the reliability of decades-old memories, the interpretation of forensic evidence, and the accuracy of modern genealogical techniques. Cross-examinations were tense, a delicate battle between human recollection and technological precision. Experts were challenged, witnesses scrutinized, and every statement dissected under the cold lens of skepticism. Yet the cumulative weight of evidence, combined with decades of investigative persistence, proved difficult to dismiss. The courtroom became a battleground of truth versus doubt, science versus speculation, memory versus evidence, each side vying to assert control over a story that had spanned generations. Outside the courtroom, Riverside reacted with a mixture of fear and fascination. Residents reflected on the realization that the killer had walked among them for 30 years, a neighbor, a co-worker, an ordinary figure masking extraordinary darkness. Parents clutched their children more tightly. Peers discussed the unsettling notion that evil can hide in the most familiar places. The media amplified the tension, highlighting every detail, every revelation, every subtle behavioral cue that had been overlooked. Riverside, once confident in its safety, was now acutely aware of the fragility of normalcy, the thin line separating everyday life from horror. Inside the trial, the prosecution presented a chilling psychological profile. Experts described the behavioral patterns, the obsessive tendencies, the meticulous planning, and the predator's ability to blend seamlessly into society. They dissected the suspect's daily routines, pointing out inconsistencies and obsessive behaviors noted by neighbors and acquaintances over the years. The jury listened intently, absorbing a portrait of someone who had existed in the shadows, whose presence was unremarkable until the horrific act was revealed. The courtroom held a collective breath as the human capacity for concealment and manipulation was laid bare, exposing the uncomfortable truth that evil often wears a familiar face. As the trial progressed, testimonies revealed previously unknown details. A distant neighbor remembered a man loitering near Emily's apartment complex weeks before her disappearance, behaviors dismissed at the time as harmless curiosity. Local shopkeepers recalled interactions that, in hindsight, carried subtle signs of obsession and interest in routines and habits that should have raised alarms. The accumulation of these minor observations, once overlooked or deemed inconsequential, became a tapestry of premeditation, each small act now magnified in significance. Riverside collectively absorbed the magnitude of these revelations, recognizing the invisible threads that had been woven across decades. The emotional weight of the trial was palpable. Emily's friends, now adults navigating their own lives, recounted memories of her humor, intelligence, and energy juxtaposed starkly against the calculated violence that ended her life. Witnesses wept openly, some gripping photographs of Emily, others clutching mementos that had survived the passage of time. The courtroom alternated between moments of intense grief and tense analysis, a delicate balance between emotion and logic. Riverside, through media coverage, experienced this emotional oscillation, feeling the pain, shock, and determination that had driven the cold case unit for decades. Legal experts analyzed the trial with keen attention. The integration of decades-old evidence with modern technology presented unique challenges, balancing admissibility, accuracy, and interpretation. Riverside's police department, though vindicated by the ultimate arrest, faced scrutiny for the initial limitations of the investigation. Experts emphasized that while technology had eventually solved the case, human diligence, meticulous record-keeping, and unyielding commitment were equally critical. The trial underscored the intersection of human persistence and scientific advancement, highlighting how patience and precision could overcome the erosion of time. During closing arguments, the prosecution emphasized the enduring impact of Emily's death on the community, the meticulous planning of the perpetrator, and the irrefutable connection established through DNA, forensic analysis, and genealogical research. The defense cautioned against assumptions, questioned interpretations, and highlighted the challenges inherent in decades-old evidence. Yet the cumulative narrative was compelling. A life lost, a community altered, and a perpetrator who had evaded justice for 30 years now unmasked. The jury, carrying the weight of decades of uncertainty, faced the task of rendering a verdict that would finally bring closure to a story long shrouded in mystery. Riverside waited with bated breath. Families, neighbors, and friends of Emily reflected on the journey from despair to revelation. Memories once quiet and private now became shared experiences, a collective acknowledgement of trauma and resilience. The city had witnessed the evolution of investigative methods, the power of forensic science, and the profound importance of persistent inquiry. Emily's story, frozen in time, had been revived, and in doing so, Riverside confronted the duality of human nature, the capacity for hidden malevolence and the relentless pursuit of truth. Even as the legal process moved toward resolution, the psychological impact lingered. Residents questioned the ordinariness of their surroundings, reconsidered their interactions, and grappled with the unsettling reality that danger can exist where it is least expected. Emily's case became emblematic, a reminder that vigilance, observation, and communal awareness are indispensable in safeguarding life and justice. Riverside, though scarred, demonstrated resilience, transforming tragedy into a lesson for future generations. And so, as the trial approached its conclusion, the city remained suspended between grief and relief, horror and admiration for the investigative triumph. Emily's memory permeated every corner, every conversation, every reflection. The courtroom had become more than a venue for legal proceedings. It was a stage upon which decades of unanswered questions, persistent investigation, and human emotion converged. Riverside had endured, had learned, and had witnessed the revelation of a truth long hidden in the shadows. The verdict would not erase the decades of suffering, nor could it restore a life lost, yet it represented the culmination of a journey. Through uncertainty, technological evolution, and relentless pursuit of justice, that had finally delivered accountability. Riverside, its streets still familiar yet forever altered, understood that the shadow of Emily's absence would endure, yet so too would the determination to confront darkness, preserve memory, and honor those who had been taken. With the trial underway, Riverside's cold case unit shifted into overdrive, retracing every investigative step that led to the arrest. Detective Sarah Linton and her colleagues pored over decades of notes, photographs, and evidence, each file revealing layers of a calculated mind that had evaded justice for 30 years. The man had lived among them, invisible yet present, every movement deliberate, every interaction carefully curated to mask intent. Forensic evidence, modern technology, and painstaking research converged to trap a predator who had once vanished into the shadows. The city watched, riveted, as the layers of deception peeled away, exposing a truth both horrifying and meticulous. The breakthrough began with the genetic genealogy that identified the suspect through distant relatives, a thread that had remained dormant for decades. From there, investigators constructed a timeline, cross-referencing every employment record, utility bill, and vehicle registration. Subtle inconsistencies emerged, nights unaccounted for, small deviations in routine, minor encounters previously dismissed. Each anomaly, now illuminated by modern analysis, revealed a pattern of stalking, observation, and careful preparation. Riverside, once unsuspecting, had been mapped and monitored, the unsuspecting paths of a young woman charted with almost surgical precision. Detectives conducted interviews with renewed focus, confronting neighbors, friends, and acquaintances with the knowledge of what had transpired decades earlier. Questions were framed not just to elicit memory, but to test consistency, uncover contradictions, and illuminate hidden details. Former neighbors recalled fleeting encounters. A man loitering near Emily's apartment, watching from a distance, casual greetings tinged with an unease they could not articulate at the time. A local shopkeeper remembered odd questions about Emily's schedule, questions now interpreted as calculated probing. Each recollection, once minor and ignored, became a critical puzzle piece, creating a mosaic of a predator concealed within normality. Surveillance and digital reconstruction further revealed the precision of the crime. Investigators mapped Emily's routine, the cafe visits, morning walks, routes to the library, and overlaid them with the movements of the suspect's vehicle and reported sightings. The pattern was undeniable. He had studied her meticulously, predicting her every movement, every pause, every chance encounter. Riverside streets, familiar to so many, now revealed hidden corridors of menace, ordinary sidewalks transformed into evidence of premeditation. The city collectively reeled at the realization that such careful planning had unfolded unnoticed, a decades-long veil of normalcy hiding the unimaginable. Forensic analysis had also unearthed details that redefined the understanding of the crime. DNA fragments recovered from Emily's clothing and the scene were re-examined under advanced sequencing techniques. Previously discarded samples now yielded results, revealing touch points, partial profiles, and patterns consistent with known predatory behavior. Fingerprints, once smudged or inconclusive, matched to household items and public locations frequented by the suspect. Even the rare shoe print, identified early in the reinvestigation, now linked to specific purchases and locations, confirming movements that aligned with the victim's final hours. Every trace became a thread, weaving an airtight narrative that corroborated witness statements and behavioral analysis. The psychological profiling of the suspect provided a chilling insight into his methods. experts described traits common in long-hidden predators: meticulous planning, social camouflage, obsession, and attachment. His ability to blend seamlessly into Riverside society, appearing ordinary, friendly, and unremarkable, masked an underlying pathology that had facilitated decades of concealment. The interviews revealed subtle manipulations, charm masking intent, and a studied presence designed to avoid suspicion. Riverside, which had considered itself safe, confronted a terrifying truth. Evil could live unnoticed among the most familiar faces, a predator hidden behind civility and routine. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, Riverside experienced a resurgence of grief and reflection. Families revisited old fears, neighbors recounted stories long buried, and the city absorbed the weight of a crime that had spanned generations. Community meetings discussed safety, vigilance, and awareness, while memorials for Emily multiplied, honoring her memory and preserving her story. Parents held their children closer, schools incorporated lessons about observation and caution, and residents became acutely aware that danger is not always obvious, that the ordinary can conceal the extraordinary in ways unimaginable. The detectives orchestrated a subtle but decisive confrontation. Using the weight of evidence and psychological tactics, they isolated the suspect from familiar environments, observing reactions and probing inconsistencies. He was faced with a carefully structured interrogation that combined patient questioning with the inescapable presentation of forensic evidence. Each contradiction was highlighted, every misstatement challenged. The process was methodical, relentless, designed not only to elicit truth, but to dismantle the carefully constructed persona that had allowed him to exist undetected for decades. Riverside's community watched in awe as the layers of deception unraveled, revealing a mind both cunning and disturbingly ordinary. Inside the interrogation room, the atmosphere was tense and electric. Detective Linton leaned forward, presenting the DNA matches, the genealogical links, the timeline inconsistencies. The suspect maintained a facade of calm, but small tells, the shift of a foot, the tightening of a jaw, a flicker of the eyes, betrayed cracks in the armor. Investigators persisted, circling back to statements, revisiting discrepancies, connecting physical evidence to anecdotal recollections. Slowly, methodically, the suspect's composure eroded under the weight of incontrovertible proof. Riverside's long-held anxieties, the terror of an invisible predator, began to coalesce into the certainty of accountability. In the courtroom, the culmination of decades of investigation played out like a tightly scripted narrative. Witnesses testified to observations once dismissed. Forensic experts revealed the painstaking reconstruction of events, and detectives recounted the breakthrough methods that had pierced the veil of anonymity. The prosecution wove a story not only of a crime, but of persistence, resilience, and the power of modern investigative science. The jury, confronted with decades of evidence, behavioral analysis, and emotional testimony, faced the challenge of reconciling time, memory, and technology into a verdict. Riverside collectively held its breath, aware that 30 years of fear, grief, and uncertainty were poised for resolution. Community reactions oscillated between disbelief, vindication, and horror. Riverside had been forced to confront the hidden dangers that lurk within the ordinary, and the realization that the killer had remained among them for 30 years prompted a reevaluation of trust, vigilance, and perception. Families, educators, and civic leaders emphasized the lessons learned. The importance of reporting unusual behavior, preserving evidence, and remaining attentive to subtle signs. Emily's story, once a private tragedy, had become a public lesson, illuminating both the vulnerabilities and the resilience inherent in human society. Even as legal closure approached, the psychological and emotional impact endured. Residents reflected on the careful orchestration of the crime, the patience required to evade detection, and the persistence needed to finally bring justice. The city grappled with the duality of relief and unease, recognizing the triumph of investigation while remaining acutely aware of the hidden dangers that might still exist. Emily's friends and family, though comforted by accountability, continued to navigate grief, the enduring presence of absence, and the slow process of healing. Riverside learned that closure does not erase trauma, but can transform uncertainty into understanding, despair into action. The arrest and subsequent trial emphasized the importance of innovation in law enforcement. Modern forensic techniques, combined with traditional investigative methods, created a synergy that overcame the limitations of time. Riverside's cold case unit became a model for other departments, demonstrating that persistence, documentation, and the integration of new technology could solve even the most challenging cases. Emily Carter's story served as proof that justice, no matter how delayed, could prevail, offering hope to families of other cold cases still frozen in time. Ultimately, the unraveling of the case revealed both the horror of human capacity for concealment and the extraordinary resilience of those dedicated to truth. Riverside, forever changed by the events of 1995 and the decades that followed, stood as a city marked by tragedy, yet fortified by determination. Emily's memory permeated every corner of her former life, a symbol of loss, endurance, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The killer's capture, while horrifying in revelation, was a testament to the power of meticulous investigation, the evolution of forensic science, and the unwavering human commitment to truth. Even after conviction, Riverside remained reflective. Streets once walked casually were now imbued with heightened awareness. Parents, neighbors, and local officials incorporated the lessons of Emily's story into daily life, understanding that vigilance, observation, and communal responsibility are essential in confronting unseen threats. The community's collective memory preserved the life lost and the darkness uncovered, transforming a tragedy into an enduring narrative of resilience, accountability, and hope. The courtroom was electric with anticipation, a palpable tension that seemed to vibrate off the walls. 30 years of unanswered questions, decades of silent anguish, and relentless pursuit of justice were about to converge in a single moment: the verdict. Riverside held its collective breath, the streets emptying as the city's residents followed updates, some from television screens, others from social media feeds, each person drawn into a story that had consumed their community for generations. Emily Carter's parents sat rigidly, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the jury box, a combination of hope, fear, and grief etched across their faces. Friends of Emily, now adults navigating lives forever shaped by her absence, murmured quietly to one another, sharing memories both tender and painful, preparing for the moment when the past would finally be confronted in its entirety. The jury filed back into the courtroom, the sound of polished shoes echoing against the walls like a drumbeat, counting down the final moments of suspense. The four persons stood, holding the verdict in trembling hands, each second stretching, taut and unyielding, as the gravity of decades hung heavy in the air. Detective Sarah Linton, who had been instrumental in unearthing the threads of this 30-year mystery, leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the suspect, noting the slightest twitch, the smallest flicker of emotion beneath the carefully maintained mask of composure. Riverside had waited for this moment longer than most of its citizens had imagined possible, and now the culmination of relentless investigation, meticulous forensic work, and unwavering dedication would be revealed. The four-person's voice rang out, deliberate and measured, yet carrying the weight of finality. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty as charged on all counts. A silence fell, immediate and suffocating, the collective exhale of decades held at bay, then released in a wave of emotion that rippled through the courtroom. Emily's parents wept openly, their bodies shaking with the release of tension, the weight of unanswered questions, the decades of grief finally finding a measure of resolution. Friends embraced one another, tears and sobs mingling with whispers of relief and vindication. Outside, Riverside erupted in a mixture of shock, elation, and reflection. News crews broadcasting the verdict live, capturing the city's response to justice long deferred. The emotional intensity was mirrored in the courtroom as the prosecution recounted the culmination of 30 years of work. Each piece of evidence, each meticulous reconstruction, each forensic breakthrough was recapitulated, illustrating the painstaking path that had finally brought the killer to justice. The DNA evidence that had lain dormant, the genealogical connections that had been painstakingly traced, the subtle inconsistencies in witness statements, all were woven together to demonstrate a narrative of planning, concealment, and eventual accountability. Riverside watched, riveted, as the tapestry of truth, long obscured by time, was fully revealed, each thread a testament to persistence, patience, and scientific evolution. The defense attempted to challenge the interpretation, questioning the validity of decades-old recollections, the reliability of genealogical techniques, and the extrapolation of behavioral profiling. Yet the overwhelming weight of corroborating evidence, physical, digital, and testimonial, proved insurmountable. The courtroom felt the tension between past and present, the juxtaposition of memory and technology, the struggle to reconcile human limitations with scientific precision. Riverside, collectively, experienced a microcosm of that struggle, a city forced to confront both the horror of hidden malevolence and the triumph of determination in unveiling it. Outside the courthouse, the city reflected on the implications of the verdict. 30 years of fear, grief, and uncertainty were crystallized in a moment of clarity, yet the psychological residue remained. Parents discussed heightened vigilance with their children, neighbors shared tales of overlooked signs, and local officials implemented new protocols for community safety. Emily's story, once private and silenced by tragedy, had become a public lesson in observation, awareness, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Riverside had confronted the invisible dangers that had lurked in familiar faces and familiar streets, understanding, at a visceral level, the fragility of perceived safety. The trial also illuminated the extraordinary resilience of law enforcement. The cold case unit, often dismissed in earlier years due to the limitations of technology and resources, emerged as the hero of the narrative. Detectives meticulously re-examined evidence, revisited witness statements, integrated modern forensic techniques, and pursued leads that had once seemed futile. Their work demonstrated that time, while complicating investigations, could also be leveraged with modern science and dogged persistence to uncover long-buried truths. Riverside celebrated this triumph of diligence, patience, and the evolution of investigative methodology, recognizing that justice, though delayed, had ultimately prevailed. Psychological analysis during the trial painted a chilling portrait of the perpetrator. Experts detailed traits common to long-hidden predators: meticulous planning, the ability to blend seamlessly into society, obsessive behavior, and social camouflage. The man's ordinary facade masked a lifetime of observation, calculation, and patience. Witness statements from decades prior were reframed in this context, revealing subtle cues of predation previously dismissed or unnoticed. Riverside residents, many of whom had known or interacted with him casually, grappled with the terrifying notion that someone capable of such violence had existed among them for so long, unnoticed, unremarked, yet ever present. The sentencing phase was equally intense. The judge emphasized both the gravity of the crime and the extraordinary circumstances of its delayed resolution. 30 years had passed, yet the emotional, psychological, and communal impact remained profound. The sentence, while symbolic, also acknowledged the meticulous work that had brought the perpetrator to justice. Emily's parents, though still carrying the weight of grief, expressed a measure of closure, a sense that decades of uncertainty, speculation, and silent suffering had finally been met with accountability. Riverside collectively processed the duality of relief and lingering unease, aware that while justice had been served, the shadow of the crime had left an indelible mark on the city's collective consciousness. Memorials and commemorations followed, a community seeking to honor Emily's memory and reaffirm its resilience. Candles flickered along familiar streets, photographs were displayed in public spaces, and stories of Emily's life. Her laughter, her ambitions, her friendships were shared openly. Riverside transformed grief into action, implementing educational programs, awareness campaigns, and safety initiatives inspired by the lessons of the past. Emily's story, while tragic, became a catalyst for reflection, prevention, and communal solidarity, ensuring that the city's experience would inform future generations and create a legacy beyond loss. The legal and forensic triumph of the case did not erase the emotional scars. Riverside residents, long accustomed to the comfort of assumed normalcy, confronted the reality that danger can exist unnoticed. Families revisited past events with a heightened awareness. Neighbors reconsidered casual interactions, and the city collectively recognized the importance of vigilance. The balance of fear and relief became a persistent undercurrent, a reminder that while justice had been achieved, the community's consciousness had been irrevocably altered by decades of uncertainty and the quiet presence of malevolence. For the cold case unit, the resolution provided both vindication and reflection. Every step of the investigation, from the initial 1995 files to the modern forensic breakthroughs, was dissected for lessons. Best practices were identified, methods refined, and strategies shared with other law enforcement agencies. Riverside's experience became a blueprint for tackling cold cases nationwide, demonstrating the necessity of meticulous documentation, persistence, and the integration of evolving technology. Emily Carter's case was no longer only a story of tragedy. It was a testament to human determination, scientific progress, and the enduring pursuit of justice. Even as Riverside moved forward, the emotional resonance of the case persisted. Streets, parks, and familiar locations carried an invisible weight, reminders of both loss and triumph. Parents, friends, and community members navigated a complex landscape of grief, relief, and reflection, understanding that the process of healing is ongoing, even after legal closure. Emily's story, once a whisper in the city's memory, became a defining chapter in Riverside's collective identity, a narrative of tragedy, resilience, and ultimate justice. The final reflection settled over Riverside like a heavy, yet clarifying, fog. 30 years of unanswered questions had been transformed into clarity. Decades of fear had been met with accountability, and a community scarred by tragedy had emerged with a renewed understanding of vigilance, resilience, and hope. Emily's life, though violently cut short, had inspired a journey that intertwined science, determination, and human perseverance, culminating in a resolution that would echo for generations. Riverside, forever altered, carried the memory of both darkness and triumph, a city reminded that justice, however delayed, is never beyond reach. And as the sun set over the familiar streets, once traversed by Emily, the city absorbed a mixture of relief, sorrow, and solemn reflection. The shadows of the past, long concealed, had been brought to light. Riverside understood that the journey of uncovering truth is rarely straightforward, that patience, diligence, and courage can pierce even the most enduring darkness, and that the memory of those lost can guide a community toward vigilance, healing, and hope. Emily Carter's story, frozen for decades in tragedy, had finally reached a measure of resolution, but the echoes of her life, her loss, and the extraordinary pursuit of justice would linger, shaping the consciousness of Riverside forever. The city of Riverside slowly exhaled, though the echoes of Emily Carter's life and her absence lingered in every corner. Streets she had once walked with unguarded familiarity now carried a sense of memory, of both caution and reverence. Local schools incorporated lessons about vigilance and safety, not to incite fear, but to arm children and parents alike with awareness. Parents who had once trusted the ordinary rhythms of neighborhood life now watched routines with a measured attentiveness, teaching their children to observe, to question, to protect. Riverside, scarred yet resilient, was learning to navigate a world in which danger had quietly existed for decades, hidden behind familiar faces, ordinary gestures, and the deceptive calm of routine life. For Emily's family, the aftermath of the trial was a mixture of closure and ongoing grief. Her parents navigated a terrain that was both familiar and uncharted, a landscape of loss transformed by accountability. They attended memorials, spoke publicly about the case, and participated in initiatives designed to prevent future tragedies. Their lives, forever altered by a single act of violence, became a conduit for awareness, a testament to the endurance of human will and the transformative power of truth revealed after decades. Friends and classmates, now adults, continued to honor Emily's memory in subtle and profound ways, creating scholarships, sharing stories, and keeping her presence alive in a community she had once brightened with her laughter and ambition. The Riverside Police Department, long engaged in painstaking detective work, experienced both vindication and transformation. The successful resolution of a 3-decade-old cold case inspired policy changes, technological investments, and new investigative protocols. The detectives involved reflected on every step, analyzing past errors, recognizing technological limitations, and celebrating the ingenuity that had ultimately cracked the case. Cold case units across the state and the nation looked to Riverside as a model, proof that no matter how long a case remained unsolved, diligence, science, and persistence could pierce the veil of decades. The legacy of Emily Carter's story extended beyond her community, influencing law enforcement practices and reminding agencies everywhere that the past can always be reclaimed. Yet the psychological ripple of the case extended far beyond the family and the detectives. Residents grappled with the unsettling realization that someone capable of violence had lived among them, invisible in plain sight. Neighborhoods that once felt safe were now approached with a cautious awareness. Conversations in homes and public spaces turned to vigilance, behavioral observation, and the subtleties of human interaction that might otherwise go unnoticed. Riverside's collective consciousness had shifted. The city's awareness of danger had been heightened, tempered by grief, and infused with an unspoken resolve to prevent similar tragedies. Memorials for Emily multiplied, each act of remembrance a marker of resilience. Candles flickered along sidewalks where she had once walked. Community gatherings celebrated her life, her dreams, and the promise of potential left unfulfilled. Schools dedicated programs in her memory, scholarship funds bore her name, and local media chronicled not just the crime, but the legacy of activism and vigilance that followed. Each commemoration was a reaffirmation that Emily's life, though tragically cut short, had left an indelible imprint on Riverside, shaping its values, awareness, and community consciousness for generations to come. In parallel, the legal and investigative communities studied the Riverside cold case as an exemplar of the intersection between forensic innovation and persistent detective work. The combination of DNA analysis, genealogical techniques, and meticulous record-keeping demonstrated that even decades-old mysteries could be solved when technology and human determination converged. Lectures, workshops, and conferences highlighted the case, emphasizing lessons learned, patience, documentation, the integration of science with traditional methods, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. Riverside's story became a narrative not only of horror and grief, but of progress, resilience, and the transformative impact of diligent investigation. The suspect, now serving a sentence that reflected the gravity of his crime, existed in a realm removed from the lives he had once infiltrated so effortlessly. Psychologists analyzed his behavior, the patterns of concealment, and the obsessive tendencies that had allowed him to remain undetected for decades. While Riverside's focus shifted toward healing and prevention, the study of his actions offered insight into human behavior, the mechanisms of long-hidden predation, and the subtle ways in which danger can masquerade as normalcy. Forensic experts emphasize that understanding such behavior is not merely academic. It is a tool for prevention, vigilance, and the safeguarding of communities. Emily's story also revealed the power of collective memory and shared experience. The community, once passive observers of a tragedy frozen in time, became active participants in shaping the narrative of remembrance. Neighborhood watch programs were revitalized, civic meetings addressed issues of safety and awareness, and residents took an active role in observing and reporting anomalies. Riverside had learned a profound lesson. Vigilance is communal, memory is powerful, and engagement is essential in confronting hidden threats. Emily's life, once violently curtailed, became the catalyst for an enduring culture of care, awareness, and protection. The psychological and emotional aftermath was not confined to human actors alone. The city itself seemed altered. Familiar streets, parks, and public spaces carried new weight, blending ordinary daily life with the residue of trauma and remembrance. Riverside had absorbed the narrative of invisible danger, the realization that evil can persist unnoticed, and the knowledge that persistent effort can illuminate truths long hidden. The city's consciousness, while shaped by grief, was tempered by the triumph of justice and the enduring memory of a life that demanded acknowledgement, reflection, and vigilance. Artistic expressions of memory and grief emerged as well. Local writers, photographers, and filmmakers captured the emotional landscape, weaving narratives that bridged tragedy with resilience. Emily's story was retold in essays, documentaries, and exhibitions, each iteration reinforcing her presence in Riverside's collective memory. These creative endeavors served both as catharsis and as educational tools, transmitting lessons of caution, empathy, and community engagement. Through storytelling, Riverside processed grief, celebrated life, and reinforced the principles of vigilance and justice that had emerged from the shadow of the cold case. In the schools, children who had been infants or not yet born when Emily disappeared grew up learning her story. Teachers incorporated lessons on observation, safety, and critical thinking. Assemblies highlighted the importance of community awareness, encouraging students to recognize the significance of seemingly small details and to respect the enduring impact of past events. Emily's narrative, once a singular tragedy, became an educational pillar, guiding the development of a generation attuned to both risk and responsibility, empathy and action. The media continued to document Riverside's transformation. Reports analyzed the interplay between community grief and resilience, the evolution of law enforcement techniques, and the psychological ramifications of long-hidden crime. Headlines highlighted lessons learned, innovations applied, and the city's ongoing commitment to honoring Emily's memory. Social media platforms buzzed with reflections, commemorations, and discussions, amplifying the impact far beyond the geographical boundaries of Riverside. The story of a 30-year-old cold case now served as a beacon for the nation, illustrating both the fragility and the strength of human society in the face of concealed malevolence. Detectives, now regarded as heroes, often reflected on the intangible aspects of the investigation. Intuition, persistence, and dedication complemented technology, revealing that the human element remains indispensable even in an age of advanced forensic science. Riverside's police department incorporated these insights into training programs, mentoring younger detectives, and sharing lessons learned with colleagues nationwide. Emily Carter's story became a living example of how patience, careful observation, and unyielding commitment could triumph over time, deception, and the concealment of truth. As Riverside moved forward, Emily's memory remained a constant, a touchstone for reflection, education, and communal resilience. The city had confronted the darkest aspects of human behavior, emerged with justice served, and begun to weave her story into the fabric of daily life. Streets, schools, parks, and neighborhoods carried the subtle weight of awareness, the knowledge that vigilance is essential, and the understanding that memory and justice are intertwined. Emily's life, her absence, and the extraordinary pursuit of truth transformed Riverside, leaving a legacy that would resonate for generations. And so, the city stood, scarred but resilient, a community forever marked by tragedy, yet strengthened by perseverance. The shadow of a predator who had lived undetected for decades had been lifted, replaced by the enduring light of justice, memory, and reflection. Riverside had learned that evil can hide behind the ordinary, but persistence, science, and collective will can uncover even the deepest concealments. Emily Carter's story, frozen in tragedy for 30 years, had become a narrative of hope, vigilance, and the enduring power of truth revealed. A reminder that even in the darkest shadows, the light of justice can prevail. The years that followed did not quiet the story, they deepened it. Riverside learned that justice, once delivered, does not erase the past. It sharpens it, clarifies it, forces a community to look backward with unblinking eyes. Every conversation about safety now carried an undertone of history, a reminder that the ordinary can conceal the extraordinary, that silence can stretch for decades and still erupt without warning. The cold case, once a headline frozen in time, became a living presence, shaping how people listened, how they noticed, how they trusted. This was no longer only about Emily Carter. It was about what happens to a city when the truth finally breaks the surface after 30 years of darkness. Investigators returned to the beginning, not to relive the horror, but to understand it. They replayed the first hours after Emily vanished, the early assumptions, the missed intersections where paths nearly crossed but didn't. Each detail, once dismissed as insignificant, now glowed with meaning. A parked car remembered too late. A neighbor's vague recollection sharpened by hindsight. A timeline stretched thin by gaps that only patience and technology could fill. The cold case revealed its final lesson slowly, deliberately. Time does not bury truth, it preserves it, waiting for the moment when someone knows how to listen. The science that unlocked the case continued to evolve, and Riverside became a reference point in a national reckoning. Genealogical databases expanded. Ethical debates intensified. How far should investigators go? Where does privacy end and justice begin? Emily's case stood at the center of that debate, not as an abstraction, but as a human story with consequences measured in decades. Panels discussed it. Universities taught it. Law enforcement agencies rewrote protocols because of it. The cold case was no longer cold. It was active, instructive, impossible to ignore. For the detectives who carried the case across generations, the resolution brought no triumphal release. Instead, there was a quieter reckoning. Careers had passed. Lives had changed. Some investigators who first touched the file were no longer alive to see its end. Their notes remained, penciled margins and typed reports forming a relay across time. Persistence became the true protagonist of the story, persistence that outlived budgets, administrations, and public interest. In Riverside, the case proved that solving a crime is not always about brilliance in a single moment, but about endurance stretched across years, sometimes lifetimes. The suspect's ordinary past continued to disturb those who examined it. There were no warning labels, no obvious fractures that screamed danger. He worked, paid bills, attended events, blended into the fabric of daily life. This was the most unsettling truth of all. The monster did not look like a monster. Psychologists warned against the comfort of stereotypes, emphasizing that violence often hides behind routine, politeness, predictability. Riverside absorbed that lesson slowly, painfully, understanding that vigilance is not paranoia, it is awareness sharpened by experience. Emily's absence remained a constant ache, resurfacing in moments both public and private. Her name appeared on plaques, in speeches, in scholarship announcements. But it also appeared in quieter places, in family kitchens, in late-night conversations, in the pauses that followed whenever someone asked what might have been. Friends imagined the life she would have lived, the paths she might have taken, the children she never had. These thoughts did not fade with the verdict. They deepened, layered by the knowledge that answers, once unreachable, had finally arrived too late to change the outcome. The community learned that closure is not a door that slams shut. It is a process, uneven and unfinished. Some residents felt relief. Others felt anger that justice had taken so long. Younger generations, raised on the resolved version of the story, struggled to grasp what it meant to live with uncertainty for decades. Riverside became a city with two memories of the same crime. One suspended in fear and unanswered questions, the other grounded in evidence and accountability. Both memories coexisted, shaping identity and perspective. Media attention returned in waves, reigniting old emotions with every documentary and long-form investigation. Cameras lingered on streets once ignored, on houses that had witnessed nothing and everything at the same time. Journalists spoke of the cold case as a resurrection, but Riverside knew better. Nothing had been brought back. Something had been exposed. The truth, once buried, now demanded responsibility, not just from the guilty, but from everyone who lived in its aftermath. Across the country, families with their own unsolved cases watched closely. Emily's story became a fragile source of hope, proof that even after decades, answers could emerge. Cold case units received new funding. Tip lines reopened. Boxes of old evidence were re-examined under new light. Riverside's tragedy ignited a broader movement, one driven by the belief that no case is ever truly finished, that time alone does not absolve guilt or erase harm. Yet with hope came fear. If this case could remain hidden for 30 years, how many others still waited in silence? How many names sat in files, unresolved, unheard? Riverside confronted the uncomfortable truth that Emily's story was not unique. It was exceptional only in its resolution. This realization fueled a renewed urgency, a collective insistence that waiting is not neutral. It has consequences measured in years of unanswered grief. The city's rituals changed. Annual gatherings became moments not only of remembrance, but of recommitment. Speakers talked about responsibility, about noticing, about speaking up even when certainty feels out of reach. The cold case had taught Riverside that silence is a collaborator, that looking away is a choice, that justice delayed reshapes entire communities, not just families. As time moved forward, the case settled into a new role, not as breaking news, but as a permanent reference point. A reminder whispered in policy meetings, classrooms, patrol briefings. Riverside no longer told the story only to shock or warn. It told it to instruct, to anchor future decisions in the weight of lived experience. Emily's name became synonymous not only with loss, but with resolve. The emotional residue lingered in unexpected ways. A familiar streetlight, a quiet park bench, ordinary places transformed into markers of memory. The city learned that trauma does not announce itself loudly. It integrates, reshapes perception, alters how safety feels. Riverside did not return to what it was before 1995. It became something else, more cautious, more aware, more determined to confront what hides beneath the surface. In law enforcement circles, the case was cited as proof that patience and progress must move together. Technology alone had not solved the crime, nor had intuition. It was the convergence, the moment when old evidence met new tools, when human stubbornness met scientific precision. That convergence became a model, a reminder that the future of justice depends on honoring the past without being trapped by it. Emily Carter's story continued to travel, crossing state lines and national borders, retold in different voices but carrying the same weight. Each retelling reinforced the central truth: time does not protect the guilty. It only tests the determination of those who refuse to forget. Riverside held onto that truth tightly, aware now of how easily stories can fade and how devastating the cost of forgetting can be. As night fell over the city, Riverside no longer pretended that darkness was empty. It understood what could exist within it, but it also understood something else: something earned through decades of waiting. That light, when persistent, eventually finds what hides. The cold case had taught the city how to wait without surrendering, how to remember without being consumed, how to carry grief without letting it define the future. And in that balance, between memory and movement, loss and resolve, Riverside continued forward, forever marked by a crime that refused to stay buried, and by a truth that arrived late but changed everything. The case was solved, but its echo remained, steady and unrelenting, a reminder that justice is not a moment. It is a commitment that must endure as long as memory itself. Time did not slow after the verdict. It accelerated, pressing forward with a strange urgency, as if the city itself sensed there was still more to confront. Riverside carried the solved cold case like a scar that had finally been named but not erased. The question that lingered was no longer who did it or how, but how a crime could live so long in silence, feeding on routine, surviving on the collective assumption that the past stays buried if left undisturbed. The answer, uncomfortable and unavoidable, settled into the city's bones. The past is patient, and it waits for those willing to face it. Long after the cameras packed up and the headlines faded, investigators continued to revisit the case in quieter ways. Not for evidence, there was none left to uncover, but for understanding. They examined decision points, the moments where chance and choice had diverged. Why one tip had been overlooked. Why one witness had not been pressed harder. Why a piece of evidence had sat dormant, untested, boxed, and shelved as technology lagged behind possibility. These reflections were not confessions of failure. They were acknowledgments of limitation, a recognition that justice operates within the constraints of its time until someone expands those boundaries. The cold case reshaped how Riverside talked about trust. Neighbors who once waved casually now remembered how easily familiarity could mask threat. This did not fracture the community, but it recalibrated it. Trust became something earned through awareness rather than assumed through proximity. People learned to observe patterns, not personalities, to notice behaviors, not reputations. The case taught them that evil does not announce itself. It integrates, adapts, waits. Emily Carter's presence remained paradoxical, everywhere and nowhere at once. Her image appeared in anniversary articles, her name spoken at community events, but it was the absence that carried the most weight. The empty space in photographs, the unanswered milestones, the birthdays marked by remembrance instead of celebration. Riverside learned that solving a case does not fill those spaces. It simply gives them context. The pain did not vanish. It sharpened into something more precise, less chaotic, but no less heavy. The ripple effects reached law enforcement agencies far beyond California. Files were reopened. Evidence rooms were reorganized. Cold cases once dismissed as unsolvable gained renewed attention. Riverside became shorthand for a warning and a promise, proof that patience could be rewarded and that neglect could cost decades. Detectives elsewhere spoke Emily's name in briefings, not as a story, but as a reminder of responsibility. Every unsolved file represented not just a mystery, but a life paused in uncertainty. Ethical questions deepened as forensic genealogy gained traction. The method that cracked the case carried power and risk in equal measure. Privacy advocates raised alarms. Legal scholars debated boundaries. Riverside sat at the center of that debate, not by choice but by consequence. Emily's case became a measuring stick. Was the intrusion justified by the outcome? The city's answer was not simple, but it was firm. Justice, when delayed this long, demands boldness. But boldness must be handled with restraint, oversight, and accountability. The lesson was not that all tools should be used indiscriminately, but that none should be ignored when time has already stolen so much. The suspect's capture did not conclude the psychological inquiry. It began it. Experts dissected how someone could commit such violence and then dissolve back into ordinary life. There were no dramatic breakdowns, no obvious slips, just discipline, compartmentalization, and silence. This understanding unsettled Riverside more than the crime itself. It forced the city to confront the uncomfortable reality that danger often thrives not in chaos, but in order. Not in the margins, but in the center of routine. As years passed, the cold case shifted from active memory to cultural imprint. It influenced how stories were told, how warnings were phrased, how children were taught to interpret the world. Schools emphasized critical thinking and awareness, not fear. Community programs focused on connection without complacency. Riverside was determined not to let the case become a cautionary tale stripped of relevance. It refused to allow Emily's story to harden into mythology. It remained a lesson, living and urgent. Families with unresolved losses continued to reach out, drawn by the case's resolution. Some asked for guidance. Others asked for hope. Riverside could offer neither certainty nor comfort, only honesty. The truth was that many cold cases would remain unsolved. But the truth was also that waiting did not equal forgetting, and persistence did not guarantee failure. Emily's case stood as evidence that time is not the enemy of justice. Indifference is. The media occasionally returned, searching for new angles, anniversaries, reflections. Each return reopened wounds, but also reinforced resolve. Riverside learned how to tell the story without sensationalism, without reducing a life to a headline. The city insisted on context, on depth, on respect. Emily was not just a victim of a cold case. She was a person whose story reshaped institutions, conversations, and priorities. In quieter moments, residents reflected on how the case had changed their perception of safety. Night felt different. Silence felt louder. Ordinary sounds, footsteps, engines, distant voices carried new significance. This heightened awareness was not fear-driven, it was knowledge-driven. Riverside had learned that safety is not the absence of threat, but the presence of vigilance. That awareness is a form of care, not suspicion. The cold case also reframed grief. For decades, grief had been suspended, unresolved, caught between hope and despair. Resolution did not end it, but it allowed it to move, to shift from paralysis to motion, from endless questioning to remembrance anchored in truth. Riverside discovered that grief, when acknowledged fully, can coexist with strength. That mourning does not weaken a community, denial does. Inside the police department, younger officers studied the case as both inspiration and warning. They learned that solving a crime requires humility, the willingness to admit what you do not yet know, and perseverance, the refusal to let that ignorance become permanent. Emily's file became required reading, not because it ended in success, but because it demonstrated the cost of delay and the value of return. Always return. Always look again. As Riverside continued forward, the cold case remained a shadow and a guide. It influenced zoning meetings, neighborhood planning, community outreach. It shaped how missing persons reports were handled, how tips were evaluated, how silence was interpreted. The city did not become obsessed with crime. It became committed to attention, to listening, to acting before time stretched into decades. Emily Carter's story did not conclude with justice. It transformed into responsibility. Responsibility to remember accurately, to act decisively, to refuse comfort in the illusion that the past is finished. Riverside understood now that every unresolved case is a question posed to the future, and the future answers based on what the present is willing to do. The solved cold case did not bring peace in the way people imagine peace. It brought clarity, and clarity is demanding. It asks for change. It insists on accountability. It refuses to let communities drift back into complacency. Riverside accepted that demand, knowing it was the only way to honor a life taken too soon and a truth uncovered too late. As the city settled into its new identity, shaped by loss and resolve, one certainty remained. The story would never fully rest. It would echo in policies, in conversations, in the quiet choices people made every day. The cold case had ended, but its lessons had not. They lingered, persistent and unyielding, reminding Riverside and anyone listening, that justice is not just something found. It is something maintained, guarded, and carried forward long after the headlines fade. The story did not fade as Riverside settled into the rhythm of years that followed. Instead, it embedded itself deeper, transforming from an event into a presence that shaped how the city breathed, how it paused, how it remembered. The solved cold case became a quiet companion to daily life, a reminder that certainty is fragile and vigilance must be renewed again and again. In Riverside, memory was no longer a passive archive. It was an active force, guiding choices, sharpening instincts, demanding attention where once there had been comfort. Every anniversary carried a different weight now. The dates no longer asked unanswered questions. They asked something harder. What had changed? What would change next? Officials stood before microphones and spoke not of closure, but of commitment. They talked about resources, about early intervention, about listening before silence could stretch into decades. The cold case had taught them that time does not absolve responsibility. It multiplies it. With each year that passes, the cost of inaction grows heavier. Emily Carter's name continued to move through the city like a low current, steady and undeniable. It surfaced in council meetings when funding for investigations was debated. It appeared in training materials for officers learning how to treat missing persons reports with urgency rather than assumption. It echoed in classrooms where students discussed ethics, technology, and justice. Emily was no longer only a victim. She was a measure of diligence, of patience, of what happens when a community refuses to forget. The police department changed in visible and invisible ways. Evidence handling protocols tightened. Digital systems replaced paper archives. Cold cases were audited regularly, not as a ceremonial gesture, but as a mandate. Detectives were taught to think beyond their own careers, to document with the understanding that someone else might finish what they began. Riverside had learned that justice is a relay, not a sprint. The baton must be passed carefully, deliberately, with nothing lost along the way. The case also altered how tips were received. No detail was dismissed as too small. No voice was ignored because it lacked confidence or clarity. Riverside understood now that truth does not always arrive polished. Sometimes it comes fragmented, hesitant, incomplete. The city learned to listen anyway, to ask again, to circle back. The cold case had shown them how easily opportunity slips away when impatience replaces persistence. Public trust, once shaken, began to rebuild on new terms. Transparency became currency. Officials shared processes, not just outcomes. They explained why decisions were made, how evidence was evaluated, where limitations remained. This openness did not erase the past, but reshaped the future. Riverside discovered that trust is not restored through reassurance, but through accountability practiced consistently, visibly, over time. Beyond institutions, the emotional geography of the city continued to evolve. Certain places carried layered meanings now. A stretch of road where Emily was last seen. A park where search teams once gathered. These locations did not become shrines, but they were never neutral again. They existed in dual states, ordinary and symbolic, present and haunted. Riverside learned to live with that duality, to acknowledge it without being consumed by it. Families who had lived through the uncertainty of the cold case shared a bond that defied explanation. They understood what it meant to wait without answers, to hold grief in suspension, to exist between hope and resignation. For them, the resolution was not an ending, but a shift. The weight did not lift. It redistributed. They carried it differently now, shaped by truth rather than speculation. The suspect's imprisonment faded into procedural routine, but the questions surrounding him did not. How many moments had passed when intervention might have been possible? How many signs went unnoticed because they did not fit a familiar narrative? Riverside confronted the uncomfortable reality that prevention requires imagination, the ability to see danger not as a stereotype, but as a possibility woven into ordinary patterns. This awareness became part of the city's collective education, subtle but persistent. As technology continued to advance, Riverside remained cautious and deliberate. The tools that had cracked the cold case were powerful, but power demanded discipline. Oversight committees formed. Ethical frameworks were debated and refined. The city understood that the pursuit of justice must not outrun the values it claims to protect. Emily's case was cited not as permission for excess, but as a call for balance between innovation and restraint, urgency and care. The media's relationship with the story matured as well. Sensational angles lost their appeal. What remained was depth, long-form investigations, reflective pieces, interviews that prioritize context over shock. Riverside insisted on this shift, pushing back against narratives that reduced the case to spectacle. The city had lived the consequences of oversimplification. It demanded better. In quieter spaces, the impact of the cold case revealed itself in small, personal choices. A parent walked their child a little farther. A neighbor checked him more often. A passerby reported something that felt off, even without certainty. These actions were not driven by fear, but by responsibility. Riverside had learned that attention is an act of care, and that care, practiced collectively, can alter outcomes before tragedy takes root. The case also reshaped how grief was spoken about. It was no longer pressure to move on. Healing was understood as nonlinear, personal, ongoing. The city allowed space for remembrance without deadline. Emily's story was not a chapter to be closed. It was a thread woven permanently into Riverside's identity, reminding everyone that loss, when acknowledged honestly, can strengthen rather than fracture. Inside training rooms and conference halls, the cold case became a cautionary framework. Instructors emphasized that time is deceptive. The absence of new information does not mean the absence of truth. They taught future investigators to respect the quiet periods, to maintain curiosity even when leads run dry. Riverside's experience became institutional memory, preserved not in files alone, but in practice. As years layered upon years, the city's narrative shifted again. The cold case was no longer the defining trauma, but it remained the defining lesson. Riverside had learned what happens when attention fades, when urgency dulls, when assumptions harden. It refused to repeat those mistakes. Policies evolved. Culture evolved. Awareness became habitual. Emily Carter's legacy settled into something enduring and complex. It was grief transformed into resolve, tragedy translated into action. Her name continued to open doors, funding streams, conversations, commitments that might otherwise have stalled. Riverside did not speak of her lightly. It spoke of her carefully, with the understanding that memory carries responsibility. The solved cold case did not offer comfort in the traditional sense. It offered clarity, and clarity demands response. Riverside accepted that demand, shaping its future around the knowledge earned through decades of waiting. The city understood now that justice is not a singular event marked by a verdict. It is a continuous process, upheld through vigilance, humility, and the willingness to confront what is easy to ignore. As night settled over Riverside, the city no longer imagined darkness as empty. It recognized it as a space that must be watched, understood, respected, but also knew that light, when sustained, reveals what hides. The cold case had proven that patience, paired with persistence, can pierce even the longest silence. And so Riverside continued, forward but not forgetful, changed but not defeated. The story lived on, not as a warning frozen in the past, but as a guide for the future. The case had been solved, yes, but its meaning continued to unfold, shaping choices, sharpening awareness, reminding everyone who listened that justice is not something found once and left behind. It is something carried, protected, and renewed year after year, long after the echoes of a cold case stop making headlines.